All right, today's verse is 1 Nephi chapter 11, verse 1. For it came to pass after I had desired to know the things that my father had seen, and believing that the Lord was able to make them known unto me, as I sat pondering in mine heart, I was caught away in the spirit of the Lord, yea, into an exceedingly high mountain, which I never had before seen, and upon which I never had before set my foot. This is known in a lot of biblical circles, this common reference to a mountain as a temple, and known by many members of the church as well, I'm sure. But we're going to look at some of the details on what makes this symbolism so important and the meaning here in 1 Nephi 11. All right, Richard J. Clifford, not a member of the church, ancient Judeo-Christian author and scholar. He says, in literatures of Judeo-Christian tradition and in other sacred texts, there is a close connection between even an identifying of temples and mountains. Joseph Smith said, I want every man who goes, speaking of the temple, to become a king and a priest. When he gets on the mountains, he may want to talk to his God. Just in the Old Testament, New Testament, Book of Mormon, even references within the Doctrine and Covenants, we see theophanies occurring on the mountains over and over and over again, whether these prophets or visionaries or even Christ himself take themselves to the top of a mountain and visit the pseudo-temple, or whether they are taken there by some sort of divine power. Either way, many of these theophanies occur at the top of temples. We have Abraham on Mount Moriah, we have Moses on Sinai, we have Elijah on Mount Carmel, and even Jesus Christ on the Mount of Transfiguration. Nephi is just another in the long list of these heavenly visions that don't occur until these men reach a summit on top of a mountain. I was carried away in the spirit of the Lord, yea, into an exceedingly high mountain, which I had never before seen, and upon which I had never before set my foot, as we read earlier. So Nephi, in context here, in chapter 11, is now having his form of his temple vision. Lehi, in chapter 8, really broke down his temple experience with us. And now Nephi wants to have the same mystery unfolded unto him. And to do so, he must be on top of a mountain. Let's talk about the three reasons known throughout Christian scholarship on why this is occurring. Elevation draws you nearer to God is the first theme or idea. In both Eastern and Western religion, one finds assumptions that elevation and height are proportioned to the thin veil that separates man from the heavenly realm. As we get closer symbolically to heaven, as we rise in elevation, we get closer to God. This would be why we read earlier in the Book of Mormon that every time an ancient Hebrew would reference Jerusalem, they would talk about going up to Jerusalem. And they leave Jerusalem, they go down from Jerusalem. The elevation was one factor, but also they're getting nearer to God, nearer to heaven. Mountain peaks represent a pristine and therefore undesecrated region. It is a natural temple, a place of altar, of consecration, of ordination, even of coronation. So when these men would get up in the mountains, they are seemingly away from the world, away from civilization, in unaltered terrain, and the evidence of that is all around in the scenery. From Isaiah, the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. In the Church of Jesus Christ, we know what a strong representation the temple has to a mountain. In conclusion, mountains seem to act as natural temples when appropriate man-made temples are not available on the earth or within the vicinity of God's chosen servant. In most of these scenarios that we talked about where this is happening, And we didn't even talk about Enoch or the brother of Jared, or many of these other situations where these men have these theophanies and end up on the top of a mountain. When this happens, it's clear to see that there's not a temple available, or there's not one that God recognizes as his temple. For instance, in the case of Jesus Christ, he believes that the temple has been made into a den of thieves, and he makes that clear in the New Testament. So his visions are not occurring within that temple that he believes has been desecrated and ruined, but they happen on mountaintops. So what does this mean for the Book of Mormon? It's further evidence that what we are seeing with Lehi and Nephi are not just cool stories that we can draw metaphors to about staying on the straight and narrow path, but they're actual endowments of power, covenants that Nephi and Lehi are making with God or renewing with God as part of a divine ordinance.